justify the preemptive strike so they could get this right to go into your living room and eliminate you if they didn't, like you. But this new one, of course, the new Antichrist is what? Drugs, the drug war. It's absolutely fabulous for their purposes. See, anti-communism had great limitations. If you were painting pictures of the horrors inside the Soviet Union from the KGB, it was pretty hard to turn around and sell the American people on the fact that we needed horrors like that in this country, police control in this country. You could fight back by saying, God, that's awful, but, we don't want that in this country. Now with drugs, they've come up with a fabulous new license. They've got the military involved in law enforcement in this country now. And this, of course, is a terribly insidious thing that we've spared ourselves from for 200 years. Other countries, you get into the death squads, military units driving around with the right to arrest. They're bringing the military in to patrol against drugs, giving corporals who are not trained as cops the right to arrest people, to shake them down, to do whatever to them. They've set up these new laws under the war on drugs, the right to confiscate property without due process, without a trial. They name you as a drug smuggler and you're guilty before you go to trial. They seize your bank assets so that you can't fund attorneys to defend yourself. And they're interfering therein with the attorney-client relationship. They're discarding due process, and they're completely turning over the whole principle at the foundation of our legal system of the fact that you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty. Now the proof of the cynicism of what they're doing, and they've used this thing, by the way, to justify invading Panama and doing incredible damage to that country and to people in that country, costing us a couple of $2 billion for the invasion and doing a couple of $1 billion of damage to that country under this new Antichrist of drug smuggling. Noriega's a drug smuggler, and so they had to arrest him, and so they invaded the country. Now, mind you, if they were serious about drugs, they would have to arrest every leader in Central America. I'm sorry, it's pervasive, the drug smuggling, and they would have to arrest huge numbers of people in the United States. And people like Oliver North would have to be arrested because he has documentary evidence in his own notes of his complicity in drug smuggling. But their purpose was not, drugs. It was the macho, the use of force, the show of force, the expanding control, if you will, and access to a new national security license, if you will. But again, the proof of the cynicism is the exaggeration of the threat of drugs in the United States. In the CIA, I went to a briefing once about drugs and alcoholism, and briefing us about managers and what you look for and who you control. They told us that alcohol damaged lots more lives in the United States than heroin. They said there was no comparison whatsoever, and it wasn't illegal, and it was socially acceptable, and everybody was drinking. Of course, every office in the CIA had at least one alcoholic. That's about normal for the society. But the number of people who die from, drug deaths, junkies who die, you're talking about something down around the neighborhood of 4,000 people in a given year. 300,000 people die from, heart disease that relates to the fatty diets that we eat. Comparable figure to smoking. Over 1 million people die each year from known causes that we are not addressing because of the powerful lobbies and groups that protect them. There's no war on tobacco. There's no war on eating beef or eating pork. But there's a war on drugs, even though the figure is, you've got to whack off 2 zeros to get even close to the number of deaths in our society, as a matter of fact, that result from drug smuggling. It is a great hoax, and the purpose of it is to gain greater control over the United States and the people in the United States. Legal control by the people who really do not have much use for democracy. Now, to bring this to a close, hopefully to have a minute for questioning, we have a situation now, to put this at the global level, the U.S. national security laws here, but what's happening, at the world level is this. Because of the massive overspending and the atmosphere of utter financial fiscal irresponsibility in the 80s under Ronald Reagan, continuing under George Bush, that led to this gigantic military buildup in a time of peace and led to this gigantic S&L crisis. We went from the world's richest country in the 1970s. By 1985, we were a debtor nation for the first time since World War I, and we eventually emerged. It was in the papers just the other day that they have admitted that the U.S. national debt is now about $3.5 trillion altogether. Now, this debt is triple compounding because you have to pay the interest on it, and the deficits are running full amok. They jimmy the figures, and forgive me, but they lie about the figures in their announcements to the press. But the fact is the deficit is relatively uncontrolled, and the third factor is the S&L bailout, which they have to tax us and suck our money to pay off the theft of these huge sums of money so that we will continue to have confidence in our banking system. Some of these twists, you know, leave me spinning off into space. But once again, the effect is that the United States, with this triple compounding debt at $3.5 trillion, is soon going to reach $10 trillion. There's nothing that's going to stop it from going like this. In a couple of years, it's going to be, you know, 4 trillion, 5 trillion, and by the year 2000, 10 trillion. The Japanese and the Dutch can't buy us out. The Japanese are already in trouble. At some point, the gears are going to lock, and then we're going to have a big crisis in this society. Now, what's happening is twofold. At that point, we can look for the U.S. next war, possibly. If you look at the U.S. history, every 15 years on the average, we've gone to war. I'm not talking about the Panamas. I mean the Vietnams, the Koreas, World War I, World War II. We're overdue. We've got a big economic crunch coming down the road. So you look, where could this thing happen? They won't do it in Southeast Asia. Did someone have an idea of where?
Right here.
In the United States, yes, but that's going to be the echo of the thing.
Middle East.
Who said Cuba? They're not going to do it in Southeast Asia. They can't sell that going back there. They're not going to do it in Central America. They're tired of that. The Middle East is too complicated. They won't do it in the Middle East, although they could get drawn in. But they resisted going into Iran. Just because it's so far away, the supply lines are too long, it's too close to the Soviet Union, it's too complex, it's too explosive. They're not going to do it in Middle Europe now. They're not communists anymore. So, you know, where in the world? It's Cuba. And they have begun the orchestration of preparation of public opinion against Cuba. It's the last holdout against glasnost and perestroika and democracy, they're telling us. They're having meetings down there in which people like Theodore Shackley, who ran the JM Wave station at the University of Miami campus that was running the OP Mongoose war against Cuba in the early 60s, trying to kill Fidel Castro, renegades at least from his group, in fact, killing President Kennedy, running this war, going on to Laos, going on to Saigon to run death squad activity, now back in Miami holding meetings where they're getting, not secret meetings, holding meetings where they're getting together to discuss the reorganization of Havana when they take over Cuba. They have bumper stickers saying home before Christmas. The Miami Herald is running articles saying that people are selling their banks and businesses to have liquid capital so they can open the first bank or the first car dealership in Havana when they return to Havana. Of course, they have in their ranks people who already have a history of running death squads. Now, they also have in their ranks Jeb Bush, George Bush's son, who goes on television. He goes to their annual celebrations of the Bay of Pigs, whatnot, and goes on television with these people arm in arm. And of course, he has a link right up to Daddy, and the CIA is fully involved. I'm not saying exactly when it's going to happen or what the dynamics are, but that's where the thrust is. That's what concerns me greatly now. We have a great railroad, steam engine, coming down the tracks at us in this debt, triple compounding debt. They have been slashing social services, and when this thing crunches, people are going to wake up and realize how we have been cheated of the things that people in industrial countries around the world expect. If you live in Germany or Sweden or Belgium or other countries around the world, they consider to be normal. And the anger is going to erupt, as this gentleman said, inside this country. And the traditional solution to try to distract the people of the United States in such times, of course, is to go to war outside. And Cuba is currently the designated enemy that they're holding if things get to the point where they can sell it, where they can get by with it and make it work. Now, on the world scene, and again, I'm talking too fast. This is a subject that really it's to insult your intelligence to be this sketchy with it, and I don't like that because this is meaty stuff that we have documented, that we can defend. The world has changed to the point where the